Hey everyone, this is Daniel from Nothing Notable, checking in with you here at the end of 2020. And listen, 2020 sucked. It was a bad year. But we don't want to focus on all of the bad things that happened. We want to focus on the good things. So in an attempt to highlight our favorite things from 2020, we've put together this series of short podcasts called The Best of 2020. We talk about our favorite television from 2020, our favorite movies, our favorite albums, some of our favorite comedy, some of our favorite YouTube channels and podcasts, and all of the stuff that helped us get through what was a terrible year. In this episode, we're talking about our favorite television shows. So sit back and enjoy what we thought was the best of 2020. 2020 was a bad year, but instead of focusing on the negatives, we wanted to talk about the positives, the very best of 2020. And for me personally, I wanted to do this as sincere as possible and to really actually talk about all the good stuff that came out, because there was a lot of really good stuff that came out. There was a lot of TV, a lot of movies, a lot of alternate media, a lot of podcasts that I did consume this year and I really enjoyed. And so as all of these like end of the year lists are being compiled, it's very easy to be cynical and it's very easy to be negative about what came out this year or what didn't come out this year. But I just wanted to highlight some of the stuff that I really loved and some of the stuff that you guys really loved. So let's go ahead and start off with television. We started reviewing one of my favorite shows of the year. Let's start there with Fargo, because that is where most people who might be listening to this actually know us from. Tyler, you and I watched Fargo, and we reviewed Fargo every single week. Jack, you did not watch Fargo, so I can only imagine you have very little to say about this.
Nah, you know what? I'm going to sit this one out.
Well, Tyler, we've already talked about Fargo so much, so we don't have to talk that much about it. But it was one of my favorite shows as the year came to a close. I reviewed everything that came out, and I realized, yeah, Fargo's definitely in my top 10, probably my top 5 of the year. So I'm curious how you look at the show now, a few weeks, a month, or however long it's been removed from the final episode.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great place to start. I mean, I said this off mic. I actually forgot to put Fargo on my list.
Yep.
Just because we talked about it for so long. I was editing those podcasts, so like I heard like 3 hours of it like every week. But I definitely think it's my least favorite Fargo season, but in a year that's 2020, I think it was great and super refreshing, super fun, and we talked about it to death, but the best part about Fargo is the performances every year, and this year is really no exception. Jessie Buckley stole the show. She really stole my heart this year in a lot of ways. I started listening to her music the other day too during my workouts, and she's really great. And I keep thinking of ending things, which we'll talk about later, and she's really great in that too.
Definitely.
And that's not even to mention like Salvatore Esposito and Gaetano Bruno, who are just great foreign actors who we got to see. And I feel like this might be a recurring thing. Like we don't get a lot of we don't get to see a lot of foreign media. And I think it's really cool that Fargo got to do that at least a little bit. Also, Who Was That Guy was my favorite extra of the year, for sure. Even though he had like a whole monologue and stuff.
Wait, actually, let me jump in on that, because I went back before the last episode. Being the good Fargo podcaster that I am, I went back and I watched the first episode and I think the second episode, like right before the last episode premiered. And what's his face is in the background of the meeting between the Cannons and the Fadas. So he's like in the back there. So he's been there from day one. We just didn't notice him.
That's so sad. Fuck that guy. No, I'm kidding. He was great. And also, it might be out already, it might not be, but Edwin Lee Gibson, we had an interview with him, who played Happy on the show and was a listener of our podcast, and he was such an interesting guy, and obviously like watch that interview to get more of his side of his 2020, because it was crazy. He actually shot Fargo during the pandemic. I didn't know that. I didn't know that they shot Fargo like 2 months before they aired it,
right?
Which was pretty crazy. But anyways, it was definitely one of the best things this season, and anything like above everything else, like the costume design and the feeling of the 1950s was so great, and really took you back to a simpler time in a lot of ways. And that's all I got to say about Fargo.
Yeah, Fargo was awesome. If you want to hear more of our thoughts, definitely check out the interview that we did with Edwin Lee Gibson. That was a real treat for us. And then also maybe go back and listen to the Fargo reviews if you haven't. I think it's a really interesting show, and it's worth the conversation and the hours that we put into it this year. Jack, let's jump over to you. Give me a show that you really like this year.
Oh, well, first of all, I want to say I will absolutely try to watch Fargo at some point in the next 5 years, based off the reviews that I have heard from my very good friends who just so happen to be on this podcast. Now, second of all, a show that I really enjoyed this year was one that I forgot actually came out this year, and that was season 3 of Ozark. That was like one of the shows I watched at like the very beginning of quarantine and lockdown, and I thought it was just such an intense and interesting show. I had seen the previous 2 seasons, and then I kind of binged through this season in about like a week and a half or so, and it was a good time.
Yeah, regrettably, I have not seen season 3 yet, but I'm a big Bateman guy, so as soon as we get off of here, I'm probably going to jump into season 3. I finished season 2, but I haven't gotten through season 3 yet. But yeah, go ahead, Tyler.
Yeah, and Ozark's been on my list for years now because I love Bateman, but I have not checked it out at all. But I just got HBO Max, so I'm hopping through some HBO shows right now, but maybe soon I'll hop on Ozark and see what that's all about, because I've heard only good things about it. And it's well, would you say, Jack, this season was the best out of the series, or just like okay?
It was good. I don't know if it was the best out of the series. Season 1, I think, still might be the best out of the whole series, but this one was good, and I thought, no spoilers, but I thought the ending was very, very intriguing.
Yeah, it's a really good cliffhanger show. It's sort of classic television in that way, and I think that's also why it's been so popular with so many people, is because it is based in sort of that classic television model of, we're going to have a huge moment at the end of this episode, and you're going to have to click on to the next one. The only difference is, in this case, you just have to click next episode or let it autoplay, as opposed to in the past, you'd have to wait a week. But it is a really fun show, really good performances.
Yeah, I want to throw out another thing that was on TV, but not so much a television show. The Last Dance, the docuseries on ESPN, I thought was terrific. I thought it was a great way for like our generation that didn't necessarily get to see Michael Jordan play, but we all heard the stories, to get like a better look at what that was like in that whole Bulls team and the dynamic around them.
Yeah, I absolutely loved The Last Dance. I made a parody of it for my for my last improv show. I wouldn't recommend checking it out, but it was pretty funny actually, so maybe check it out. Anyways, I just found it so, like, especially at the time of the pandemic that was it was like so like refreshing to remember a time where everyone could just go outside and like watch sports, especially because at that point sports weren't really back at all. And I just loved how every episode was basically someone doing something petty towards Michael Jordan and him being like, you know what, fuck this, like I'm just gonna destroy you, no matter how like little and insignificant it was. Like if someone like stole like a sandwich from him, like he'd like just take it on the court and just like beat them in like 4 games. Like it was just really great to see. And it was also like, I had heard stories about Dennis Rodman a lot also, just about his life and stuff. And I think he has like kind of his own episode, and that was also really cool to see him fleshed out. And yeah, it's always funny to see sports stars when they're older, because they're just like not really in that good of shape anymore.
And they have yellow eyes and...
yeah, they're smoking big cigars and shit. But it was really well done. And the intro, I think, is probably the best intro of 2020. I would say that always got me hyped every episode. It was like, and then he stole my sandwich. And then it like went into the song, and it was great. It was such a good show. It gave us exactly what we needed in a time where there was no
sport to be watching. So it became everyone's sport. It became our pastime, was to watch The Last Dance. And it's funny how it was originally going to come out later, and they were like, no, we're pushing this up. And it was going to just probably, I think I had heard they were going to release it all within a week and a half or so. They were just going to do it each night. But they realized that there was a whole culture that could be built around this. And sure enough, it did. And Jack, you and I will talk about this later, but we listened to a lot of sports podcasts. And so the ebb and flow of what was happening on the Last Dance and then what was happening in the sports media was also really fun. It was the best and the worst of the sports media, commenting on and then dissecting The Last Dance every Monday morning.
Yeah, and kind of going off that docuseries, there's another docuseries from Netflix that was huge at the beginning, and I think it really calmed me at the beginning of all this. Tiger King is an insane documentary about a crazy person and his zoo that he owns. And more importantly, I think the most important part is that guy on the jet ski at the end. I forgot his name, but that was the best thing for me in that whole series. You got guys with cowboy hats being like, yep, I produced a show about him, but then he burned all the footage, or someone burned it down. I don't know. It's really weird because he starts out the documentary, doesn't play that huge of a role. Anyways, again, I was just like living in a house with my partner at the time, and just us two, and like watching Tiger King every night slowly was just like a lot of fun, and being like, wow, that's so weird that all happened. But yeah, it's a fun series, really strange. Joe Exotic is a really weird guy. But I definitely think like it is a little overhyped, but I definitely think the documentary is like well made, above everything else.
Yeah, it was, it was stupid and it was fun, and it was exactly what we needed in March when we thought we were going to be trapped inside for 2 to 3 weeks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I'll just watch this.
Exactly. And yeah, it became such a huge event. I mean, everybody watched Tiger King. And for me, as soon as we had all watched it, I said to you guys, like, this is literally a nothing notable documentary. Like, this is something that we would have made. It's that silly, and it's that crazy. There's beats in it that resemble our series, Gerald Lee Page.
Which, if you have not seen Gerald Lee Page, go check it out.
That is from the best of 2017 or 2018, whenever that came out.
2018, I think, yeah.
That's in the best of 2018 pod. But yeah, Tiger King, for me, what's so fun about it is, well, first let me say this. It's easy to confuse a good documentary with good documentary footage. It doesn't always correlate. But I do think that this was a really well-made documentary. It just so happens to have incredible footage. Where it doesn't quite stick the landing is at the end, because it starts off by saying, like, this show is about these animals. And then it quickly devolves into the exploration of these psycho people. And then just stays there. It doesn't really have a moment at the end of the show where it's like, by the way, we diverted into this crazy world of these people, but let's pull back and have a 30-second shot of a tiger to end the series. There's never a moment like that where they pull back again. It just keeps going further and further and further. And so because of that, it's a little sensational. It's a little bit, I don't know, it seems a little bit careless of them to not really make the heart of the story about the animals there at the end.
Yeah, they don't exactly go full out into being like Joe Exotic and Carol Baskins, and all of these people are actually insane. Like, and like they're hurting animals, at the end of the day, like, no matter what, they're still putting animals in captivity, all of them. But I think a documentary that does that really well, not from 2020, but I'll just say it now, is Werner Herzog's Grizzly Man. One
of the greats.
It's kind of about a similar... It is about an eccentric blonde man who loves animals. And it definitely says something, though, about, like, how crazy he was, and, like, how when Werner Herzog and, like, the audience sees a bear, it's like, that's not something you cuddle up to. That is a monster, and that's something that will kill you if you get too close. And I don't think Tiger King does that exactly, but also I don't think it necessarily needed to, just because it was supposed to be like a goofy meme documentary at the beginning of the pandemic, I guess.
That's really what it was, or what it turned into at least, was one just giant meme.
Yeah. Oh man, Jack, you had a Tiger King profile picture, right?
I still do.
Oh, you still do. Awesome.
Look, I don't have any other pictures to turn it to right now. I've not taken a single picture in the last 9 months. So here we are.
Since we're just talking about Netflix, and again, we started off by talking about Fargo, which is a show that we've talked extensively about. Another show that we've already talked about, so let's not talk too much about it, but also on Netflix, The Queen's Gambit, another one of my favorite shows of the year. We did a Queen's Gambit podcast. I'm not sure if it's out yet at the time that this is being released or if it'll be out after the fact. But any little wrap-up thoughts that you have about The Queen's Gambit, where it sits for you guys in terms of all the shows that you watched this year, kind of where it ranks out perhaps?
It was happy and sweet, and I enjoyed it. And it was I don't have a number for it, but it was one of the better things that I watched this year.
Yeah, same here. Performance-based, I think Anya Taylor-Joy is one of the best performances of the year. She brings so much soul and wonder to Beth Harmon. And yeah, we talked about it, but it's a great show.
Totally. Let's jump into a show that we both found this year, Tyler. What We Do in the Shadows, based off of a movie that we've both loved for a long time. The show it's everything that the movie promises and so much more. We've talked about this off mic, but I love the characters in What We Do in the Shadows so much, and so much more than I did the characters in the movie. And the hijinks that they get into and the stuff that happens in the show, all anchored by really terrific standout performances that we should talk about. It's so much fun. It's so much fun. What were your thoughts on What We Do in the Shadows?
I mean, you hit the nail on the head when you said it's the movie and more. Like, I remember not wanting to watch the show because I was like, I mean, I love the movie and like I don't want it to ruin it. And I knew Taika Waititi and Jermaine Clement were involved, and like I just never gave it the time of day. And then finally this year I did, and it is truly wonderful. And I do like the characters more, and I think it's because there's a lot more downtime with them. Like in the movie, it's kind of like they just keep killing people, and it's like, oh God, like this is funny, but I don't really like them that much because they're just like murdering a bunch of people because they have to, they're vampires. But in the show, it's like there's just so much downtime. Like there's a whole episode where Matt Berry as Laszlo goes to Pennsylvania and just does a whole different show. Like it's like a classic like Cheers like type episode where he helps like a volleyball team, and like you just don't get that with like Taika Waititi's character, you know, just because like there's not enough time in a movie. But in something like What We Do in the Shadows, it's just so refreshing to just like really live in this world, and they created such a beautiful and lovely world. And yeah, it's just wonderful, and I would recommend checking it out. And also, we'll talk about Matt Berry, but I found Matt Berry this year, and he's one of my favorite performers just in general. He is so weird and so awesome.
Yeah, the whole cast is just absolute breakout performance after breakout performance. Literally every one of the core members of that show are giving their very best performance. I think it's the funniest show of 2020. I think it's probably going to be the funniest show of 2021 if it comes back next year.
Totally.
I can't recommend it enough. I think everybody will love this show. I don't think there's a single person that won't think this is a funny show. And
we'll have a whole review of it soon, which is really funny because when we started watching it, we're like, we'll never review this. But the more we watched it and the more we just love joking about it, it's like we have to. Like it's such like an interesting world that they've created in this 10-episode sitcom.
Now, Jack, you have one more show that you want to shout out. What is it? Oh, yeah. I actually thought of two more that I want to shout out super quick. I really enjoyed this season of This Is Us so far. It's a show that is quite a bit cheesy at times, but I think the performances in it are all excellent, and sometimes you just need something like that.
Excellent job there. And then another one of my escape shows that I just love oh so much is Real Housewives of the Potomac on Bravo. That show is the best thing ever. I cannot wait to watch part 3 of the reunion tonight. It's going to be wild.
Tyler, did you happen to watch Real Housewives this year?
No, I didn't, but I did watch 90 Day Fiance here and there, and that was also like a guilty pleasure that was kind of fun.
Yeah.
You know, you're living in a house with people that watch 90 Day Fiance, you're bound to watch a few episodes, and it was a lot of fun.
Look, sometimes you need something that's just fun and mindless and absolutely insane, and that's what Real Housewives and that's what 90 Day Fiance is all about.
Yeah, I'll eat a Taco Bell taco occasionally, you know? So one of my shows that I have not mentioned yet, I actually just started watching it because I just got HBO Max. One of the best streaming services, I will say. Turner Classic Movies are on there. Mm-hmm. That's all I'll say. How To with John Wilson.
Yeah.
It's Nathan Fielder's, he's an executive producer on it, but he's not in it at all. But it's about this guy who lives in New York, and he kind of just films everything. He was a videographer for a long time for like infomercials and stuff. And each one is just kind of like a how-to 30-minute video about like the first episode. It's like how to do small talk. And it's just a really fun documentary series about like life in general. I know that's like a broad ass term, but like that's what the show's about. He really just records everything in his life, and like to some extent after you record so much, like year by year, month by month, whatever, you realize that you can make a story out of all this footage that you've gained. And as I get into editing and stuff, it's a really interesting show to watch, and it's lovely to see them string something together seemingly out of just everyday life. Highly would recommend it. If you like Nathan For You, it's not exactly the same, but it's like a similar feeling to it.
His eye for the abnormal is really incredible, because you'll walk through a city, well, not so much now, but you'd walk through a city and you'd walk past all of these weird things, and because you're in the city, you would ignore them because it's just every day. But by putting a camera on them and focusing on them, as John Wilson does, it shows you how weird and strange human beings are, and also how beautiful and lovely and kind and warm and dark and evil and all of it we all can be. And so, yeah, I think that's a really good show. I have one more HBO Max show to mention, and then two after that, two other shows. I haven't finished it yet, but I've started watching Industry on HBO Max. Industry is set in the finance world of the UK, and it's all of these young people who come to start working as traders on the floor at this firm in the UK, and whether or not they are able to get accepted into the program, because they're doing like a sort of a trial program, basically. It's drugs, it's sex, it's rock and roll. It's a delight to watch. And again, I haven't finished it yet, so maybe they don't stick the landing, but it's a really good show, and I'd highly recommend it. It's definitely up there in terms of the shows that I watched this year.
Yeah, and really quick, also HBO Max, I just started watching. I think, Jack, you've watched some of it too. I don't know, maybe all of it. But I May Destroy You, Michaela Cole's show.
Yeah.
Really beautiful, all about relationships and like just, you know, kind of like a writer going through like a very traumatic experience. Mm-hmm. And it's really interesting, and it's shot beautifully.
Yeah, I've only seen the first, I think, 3 episodes so far, but so far so good.
A Netflix show that came out, only 3 episodes, but really good, and it hit me in the feels. Not like I cried, but like I was like, damn, I miss doing improv. Middleditch and Schwartz, a lot of fun. Really funny guys. I thought I would like Thomas Middleditch's improv more, but I actually really love Ben Schwartz. He like kind of like steered the ship typically. Like Thomas Middleditch was doing all these crazy fun characters, but like Ben Schwartz really like grabbed hold of like the soul of the show and kind of like steered it in the right direction. But really fun show. The Ghost character's arc is really good in it. So yeah. So any thoughts on Middleditch and Schwartz? Yeah,
Middleditch and Schwartz is not what I expected it to be. I I think most things that go on to Netflix that are in the comedy section that aren't stand-up specials are usually kind of trash. Like, if I'm being totally honest. And I love both of these performers. So I was kind of, I didn't expect very much, but I gave it a shot because, like I said, I like both of these performers. And what ensued was everything that I love about improv. I think this show made me realize I like long-form improv more than short-form improv. Because it's more attuned with what I'm interested in just as a storyteller. Because you're able to tell an actual story with the 30, 40, 50 minutes that you're doing the show. And I think, like you said, it is Ben Schwartz that's steering the ship. And it's the dynamic between those two. Middleditch is able to be so crazy and so silly and so out there. And so is Schwartz. But at the end of the day, it's Schwartz that grounds the emotion of the story. He'll pull back and reveal a really sweet and innocent story detail or character detail that really makes the show as good as it can be. Also, shout out to Short Paul. Short Paul is the funniest thing that happened all year, other than maybe Jackie Daytona.
Yeah, it's a toss-up between Jackie Daytona and Short Paul. She just calls me fucking Paul? That was good. She didn't say short.
When he first starts talking also, he's just like sitting there and he goes, "Hey, how's it going?" It's the most annoying voice in the world. And the way that Schwartz reacts, where he's like, "Okay, here we go." That's what I love about the show, is how much they love each other. And like when they do bits to like throw each other off.
Yeah.
And the show does devolve at times where they lose track of characters. And that's so fun and it's so light. It's not so serious. Just a totally, totally fun show. And I hope and pray that they make more. I hope that they get 20 seasons out of this.
Yeah, I implore people, if you haven't ever checked out long form improv, I think it's great. I've been doing it for like 3 years now, and it's really just it makes you appreciate like writing a lot more, but also just stuff coming out of your head, just like really, really beautiful, and like making a funny but sweet story at the same time. I think that's what long form improv can do that short form is like has to be more cheeky about, if that makes sense.
It is significantly more interesting and entertaining than short form improv, and way more fun to do, in my opinion.
No, totally. And this is kind of a nice segue. This didn't come out in 2020, but I watched all of it again, and I was reminded why I loved it so much. And I just wanted to give a brief shout out to the TV series Community. I think it's Dan Harmon's best. I think the first 2 seasons are perfect. And I actually forgot how good they were because I was rewatching. I'm like, why don't I rewatch this show or talk about it as much anymore? And I'm just really happy. 2020 reminded me why I loved Community. And it has had a huge influence on me just in general.
Yeah, Community and a number of other shows and movies that came out well before the year 2020 found their way to different streaming services this year, and because of that found a new audience. So it's kind of like a 2020 show for a lot of people. It was for me, for example. It was my introduction to the show. I hadn't watched it before this year, and I'm really glad I found it. It's easily my second favorite sitcom of all time.
Same
I have 2 more shows that I'll just mention really quickly, and then we'll segue into our best movies of the year. Both of these shows are about relationships, but 2 very different relationships, both sort of cautionary tales. The first is A Teacher on Fx and Hulu. It was kind of a roller coaster for me all season. I thought it started off really strong. It got really bad for about an episode. It's the getaway episode, if anyone has watched it. And then it comes back really strong in this back half. And the reason that I think that the show is actually really terrific, why it held up from that kind of weak middle point, is because instead of what would normally be the narrative, where it's about this teacher and the student who are falling in love and having a very inappropriate, illicit affair, where it would normally be about that and then building up to the breakup and the breakdown, it goes beyond that. The breakup and breakdown happens midway through the season, and then the rest of the season is just the ramifications. And they're very real, and they're very raw, and they're very sad, and they really punch you in the gut. And that's why the show, I think, is as good as it is. If it was just 6 episodes, build up to the breakup, call it a show, it wouldn't be that great. It's really seeing how this relationship affected both characters after the fact. It's this back half that really shows you like that this is why it's so bad. Because for so many people, it's just like a porn category, like the sexy teacher, you know? It's just it's a male fantasy, and they go into that in the show. And it's not that. It's really sad what happens to these people. And I think it's a really good cautionary tale. My other show, which I also haven't finished yet, Normal People. It's on Hulu. It's a show set in the UK, and it's about these 2 teenagers that fall in love. But I think it's really specific and really personal. It's a deep exploration of these 2 characters, and it's a show that I'd highly recommend. Again, haven't finished it, so maybe it doesn't stick the landing, but really good show. So those are my favorite shows of the year. I watched a number of other shows that I didn't mention because I didn't think that were good. And there were a number of shows that I didn't get around to watching. So unfortunately, it's an incomplete list. But let's go ahead and move on to our favorite movies of the year. So that's going to wrap up part 1 of our Best of 2020 series. As always, we want this to be a conversation, so please let us know what shows you are watching. We'd certainly appreciate the recommendations. Tune in for part 2 of the series coming out tomorrow, where we talk about our favorite movies of the year. Thank you for listening. See you then.